Hello Internet, 'tis the season to get scary, and last night I caught up with an old friend that I haven't seen for years, Bob Clark's Black Christmas. The first time I saw this I was lucky enough to catch it by accident on television at about midnight, maybe 1 o'clock in the morning on Christmas Eve, and it scared the pants off me. It really helped that I was alone in a strange house. If you're going to watch this film, don't watch it alone in a strange house, because it will give you a frickin' heart attack. I am so pleased to report that catching up with it this many years later, I wondered whether it was the setting and the context that made me remember it so fondly. This is a great, wonderful little film that hasn't got the level of notoriety and fame that it deserves. I picked this up secondhand for £1. £1. The first half of this little video is going to be talking about the excellent Bob Clark's 1974 Black Christmas, and already winging its way to me in the post is the 2006 remake, which I've never seen. So the second half of the movie is, I'll be honest, it's batting against a high average, so it's probably going to be a chalk and cheese video, but I don't want to damn the remake without having seen it. I'm going to give it a fair crack of the whip. I understand it's significantly different tonally and script-wise to this one, so it's not going to be an exact like for like. But I want to take the first portion of this movie to recommend the 1974 Black Christmas, which came out a little before Halloween, but Halloween broke that wave and has earned its place in horror cinema history, whereas this sort of fell to one side in the wake of Halloween, undeservedly so. This movie is fantastic, and I'm going to lay out why. The film takes its cue from that urban legend that we all know of the babysitter and the call coming from upstairs within the house, and to that end, films like Urban Legend owe a debt to this film. This is the sort of progenitor of stuff like that, and there are similarities in the mix with Halloween. I've read that a proposed sequel to this was going to be called Halloween. This was going to be called Halloween originally, but Bob Clark wanted to actually juxtapose the horror against a much more family-friendly holiday, so flipped it to Christmas time and wanted the sequel to be set in Halloween. And we know that John Carpenter's original Halloween script was originally going to be called The Babysitter Murders, so tying in again with the urban legend of the babysitter being killed. So all of this stuff between this film and Halloween, all of the very similar themes and tones are bubbling up, and I'm not going to compare it with Halloween too much. John Carpenter's Halloween is a pretty much perfect movie, and it stands on its own. This movie is strong enough in its own right and doesn't need to ride the coattails of John Carpenter's masterpiece. We meet our cast, who on the whole are sisters in a sorority house just before they break up for the Christmas vacation. So lots of the sorority sisters are leaving, some are staying behind for an extra night, an extra couple of nights, so the house is empty, and right off the bat we start with a POV shot, very similar to how Halloween kicks off with a POV shot of a guy. We assume it's a guy, it turns out to be a guy, the killer, circling the house, trying to find his way in, and he climbs up the rose trellis and enters through an attic window, and he spends the rest of the majority of the film in the attic, only coming down to pick off some of the students one by one. And the setting of the empty, wintry, Christmas decorated sorority house, where we know that there's a killer hiding in the attic, just ratchets, ugh, my tongue, ratchets up the tension to such a degree. Like Halloween, and I said I wasn't going to reference Halloween too much, but also like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, there's very little gore in this film. This is much more of a suspense movie, but the horror comes from the suspense and the situation, and it tightens and tightens and tightens and tightens, and there doesn't need to be big, flashy, bloody kills, because the situation in and of itself is horrible and desperately depressing. There's an inevitability to it, even though the majority of the characters, for the majority of the time, act very sensibly in the situation that they're in. We watched Scream right after this, which, funnily enough, is another movie that tries to pride itself on characters, quote, running out the front door instead of running up the stairs, and also ties in with the killer on the phone. The phone plays a big part in amping up the tension in this, because the killer keeps making obscene phone calls to the house that are already setting the residents on edge. They start off obscene, and then they get threatening, and then they just get fucking batshit crazy, because our killer, named alternately Billy or Agnes, his obscene and freaky phone calls are very reminiscent of Reagan's possessed voice in The Exorcist, when this guy is fucking nuts. So when he's talking in a small child's voice, and then a man's voice, then a croaky old woman's voice. He's having arguments with himself, just giving little windows into his fractured psyche and potentially his history that give tiny little clues as to why he may be doing what he's doing. But the ultimate horror of this is that he is pure insanity. There is no rhyme, no reason, no explanation, no motive. Pure rage, anger, and insanity. And once you're wrapped up in that world and taken along for the ride that is Black Christmas, it barrels you through with unbelievable tension to the very end. Tension that is leavened, I must admit, all the way throughout, and this is an aspect that I'd forgotten from my first viewing, with excellent moments of levity and humour. Dark humour, no doubt, but some very, very, very funny shit going on in this film as well. But the humour in some way doesn't relieve the pressure cooker of the situation they're in. It's almost, it gets to a point where it's almost like a survival instinct. You're either going to laugh or you scream, the girls in this situation. So you just feel for them all the way through as they slowly start to realise, as there's less and less of them, that they're in the middle of some kind of whirlwind that they didn't even realise they'd got caught up in, and there really is no way out. One of the key strengths of this movie is the characters, and it's something I notice you get from 70s movies that you don't get with glossy Platinum Dunes style horror remakes and things like that these days, where everyone is impossibly beautiful. These are first and foremost actors, and they look like real people, and they act like real people. Some of them are absolute dicks, some of them you don't like, some of them you feel sorry for, some of them you don't want harm to come to them. But they felt like real people to me. They swear and they have flaws, and some of them drink too much, and they smoke, and they're worried, and they're scared, and they're hopeful for the future, and they've got plans, and they've got their whole life ahead of them, so they're full of that bravado of youth, but also that ignorance that comes with youth. So the more I watch films with characters like this in, the more shallow and vapid the majority of the mainstream horror movies we get nowadays seem, with pretty people doing stupid things. Not in this case whatsoever. And key members of the cast, Olivia Hussey is essentially what would become later our final girl. Margot Kidder in one of her first, if not her first movie role, who later on became super famous for being Lois Lane in the Superman movies, in the Richard Donner Superman, the movie. She's fantastic in this. She's a brassy, ballsy, most of the time drunk, speaks her mouth. She would be a nightmare to be around, but this is a class performance all the way. She's a strong, strong woman. It's filled with strong women, just strong, different types of women, all the way up to the housekeeper, for want of a better word, the lady that looks after the sisters in the sorority house, Mrs. Mack, who herself is a drunk, and she's got the vocabulary of a sailor, and she's absolutely fantastic as well. Keir Dullea, I've totally pronounced that wrong, who was Dave Bowman in 2001, is the boyfriend of one of the girls. It's great to see him in a role that's not 2001 and Dave Bowman, and he's really intense in this film as well. And the mighty John Saxon, again playing a police detective like he did a few years later in Nightmare on Elm Street as Nancy Thompson's dad. He's just a streak of class throughout this movie as well, and for God's sake, he was in Enter the Dragon. The man's a cult movie legend. The cast is really strong. The characters are written really strongly as well, and they've got a lot going on for them. One of the characters is pregnant and she wants to have an abortion, and her boyfriend Keir Dullea doesn't want her to. There's some melodrama type stuff going on as well, but I love the fact that their lives are going on whilst this is also happening. Whilst one of their friends has gone missing, we know they're dead, and they try and get the police involved. To me, it plays so much better than a group of teens in a cabin being killed off one by one, and what do they do about it? I love the fact that in this, the girls, for the longest time, don't know that this awful, awful thing is happening to them, and their lives are carrying on. But with the added stress and tension and worry of the fact that one of their friends has gone missing, and the longer she's missing and the longer they can't find her or don't hear from her, they think that something really bad has happened to her, and as it turns out, something bad is happening to all of them. Brief mention must be made of the soundtrack, or the sonic landscape throughout the movie. It's not just the phone calls and how they're distorted and the different voices and the like, but that plays a massive part of it. But the atonal soundtrack and the plucking strings and things like that, which feeds all the way into the boyfriend character who wants to be a concert pianist. He has a piano exam, and right in the middle of the movie, because he's just found out that his girlfriend's pregnant and he wants the baby and she doesn't, his piano exam is all this atonal, discordant, mad shit. He's just getting all of his anger and frustration out, and that plays into the soundtrack as well. It's very unsettling, puts you very on edge. Nothing is done by the numbers in this movie, and the soundtrack plays a big part on that as well. And finally, you all know me. You know how much I like a horror movie that's got a little bit of substance under the surface, and this one definitely does. We're going to be talking, briefly touching on the end of the movie a little as well, so this is not a spoiler-free review, although it's not spoiler-filled, but one of the famous things about this movie is the ambiguity of the ending, and the fact that the killer's not caught, and the killer's motives are never found out. The killer's name is not even found out, and his face is barely seen. The most of what we see of him is his eye. Just look at that. He's not actually looking out through Christmas decorations, as they put on the back of this box, but through a crack in a door in what, to my mind, is the absolute scariest shot of the movie. Where a girl's going into her friend's bedroom and she sees her friend, two of her friends' bodies laid out on the bed, and if that isn't shocking enough, she looks up at the door, and between the door and the door jamb, there's just that eye looking at her. Oh my, forget about it. Forget about it. That's terrifying. But one of the reasons I think that is a strength of the movie is it makes our killer essentially a force of nature. And one of the things I think this movie is about is the reality then, and probably unfortunately now, the reality of being a woman in a man's world. I don't think this is a movie that gets off on being about a man killing lots of women. I think that's very specific for the point of this film. Throughout, you've got lots of strong young women in this, setting out in life, getting their education, but all the way through, you've got the boyfriend telling her that she's not allowed to get an abortion, that she has to have a discussion with him first, and essentially saying that it's not up to her to decide what happens to her body. He even tells her that they're going to get married later on. You've got the police who don't listen to them when they say their friend's gone missing. Oh, you know, she's a student, she's just shacked up with some boy somewhere. They don't listen to the girls when the girls say that they're receiving obscene phone calls. They only listen when the boyfriend of the missing girl turns up and demands that they do something about it. They only get some traction when the father of the missing girl turns up and says that they should need to do something about it, and they finally get access to John Saxon's character, who takes an interest in it, realises that something's going wrong and starts to investigate. But up until that point, they're essentially being dismissed because they're girls. And they can't decide what they want to do, and they can't have dreams for themselves. One of them is told that she has to put her plans on hold because her boyfriend's plans take precedence. So this killer becomes almost a metaphysical embodiment of violence against women, of a patriarchal society. Sorry to bring such multi-syllabic words into a review, but I genuinely think that that's part of what's going on in this movie, apart from being a cracking slasher movie that is scary and tense and unlike anything that you'll have seen before, if you can put it in the context that it came before an awful lot of what you'll have seen before. I can't recommend it highly enough. I'm a little worried with what 2006 version is going to be like, but I will give it its fair shot. And so it'll turn up in a few days, and we're going to see how that plays out. But if you only watch this half of my video, and if you have not seen Black Christmas, it's December. Now is the time. 'Tis the season to watch Black Christmas. 1974. Okay, so we've just seen the 2006 Black Christmas, or Black Xmas as it's called. We saw the 1974 version a couple of days ago. What was your favourite bit about the 1974 one? What was your favourite thing about it?
Probably the bit where he puts his eye through the hole.
And what was your least favourite thing about it?
The fact that there's absolutely no explanation about who the person is who's killing everyone.
Is there an explanation in this one as to why he's killing everyone?
I don't know, I wasn't really paying that much attention.
What did you think of the 2006 version?
Considering I wasn't that big of a fan of the first one, I actually thought the 2006 one was worse, which is saying a lot considering.
People, it's absolute fucking trash. Don't waste your time with it. It's absolute fucking garbage. I was bored. Hannah was looking on Facebook. I don't blame her. Vapid, pretty stupid people.
What he said.
That film makes me so fucking angry. I spent 18 minutes talking about how good I thought the original was. Don't listen to her on that one. It was class. And the eye against the hole, I talked about that, and she's right. That was the fucking best moment in the film. This is bollocks. The villain in it, Billy in this, has got yellow skin. For no reason. He looks like that yellow bastard out of Sin City. It's pathetic. You get a little bit of gore in it, but it's nonsense. It's absolutely not worth your time or effort, and it's actually not worth any more of my time to talking about it. It's fucking appalling. Do you have anything to add?
No.
Merry Christmas, everyone.